Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 443 of the Juicebox Podcast. My hello, friends has gotten higher. I don't know if you've noticed or not lately. I could be like, hello, friends, but I'm sometimes like, hello, friends. I just let it happen. Anyway, hello, friends. Welcome to episode 442 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's show is with Kim. Kim's daughter has been recently diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and Kim has found a very interesting and important way to donate her time to type 1. Today we're going to be talking a lot about clinical trials, but also about Kim's daughter and their experience. It's a little mishmash, a hodgepodge kind of a thing. But Kim, well, I'll let her tell you what she does. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Please always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. I have to admit, just then I kind of showed off with my lower range of my voice because I went into that whole like, hello, friends thing. I was like, let me just show off my lower range. All right, so enough of that silliness. Before we get started, though, I have to say this. The show has advertisers. And this show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. The show is also sponsored today by the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. Check it out at contournext.com/juicebox. Juicebox /
Hi, I'm Kim. And until about a year and a half ago, I knew absolutely nothing about any kind of diabetes. And at that point, my daughter, Nina, who was then 13, was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And based on a few things that happened at her diagnosis and a few things I learned a little bit later on, I decided to get involved with letting people know about clinical trials. So I became a clinical trial education volunteer with JDRF, which basically means I find out everything I can about clinical trials and try to match patients with clinical trials that might benefit them and obviously benefit type 1 diabetics as a whole.
Wow, what chapter are you with?
I'm with the Northern California chapter, and JDRF has launched this as a sort of a trial balloon initiative with a bunch of chapters throughout the country. So there's a team of clinical trial education volunteers that they're hoping to grow soon.
So you're basically out in the world looking for clinical trials that exist for people with type 1 diabetes, then going back to the people within your chapter and letting them know about it?
Exactly.
Okay. Well, that's pretty cool. And that's a newer thing for you guys.
It's a newer thing for JDRF, and it's and all of this is a newer thing for me.
Yeah. Well, so you sort of said at the beginning and didn't say that something that happened made you interested in it. What happened that made you interested in clinical trials?
Well, I think there were kind of three things. And I knew I wanted to get involved in helping in whatever way I could make things better for people with this disease and for my daughter. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the few things that happened was, one, when my daughter was diagnosed, there was a clinical trial going on called PROTECT. And this is a trial that's still going on where they give you a drug called teplizumab, which has been proven in people who haven't yet gotten diabetes, but have antibodies that predict that they will get diabetes. They've shown that this drug can prevent the onset of diabetes for 3 years. And so now they're testing this drug in kids who are newly diagnosed with diabetes to see if they can keep the honeymoon going longer and keep their insulin producing beta cells producing insulin longer. And this trial was happening, and I didn't find out about it right away. But then when I did find out about it, I think it was the 4th of July, and had a hard time finding someone to talk to about it. And when I did, they were wonderful. But then we were going on a trip, and we didn't want to cancel the trip because A, we wanted to go on the trip, and B, we wanted to, show our daughter that our lives weren't going to change. So we never got the opportunity to do this trial because it was, you needed to get involved in it within 3 weeks of diagnosis. And since then, my daughter has a friend who has done this trial and needs about a third of the insulin that she does. And that's just an anecdote, but I really wish we had figured out a way to get involved in that clinical trial back when she was first diagnosed. So that was kind of the first thing that happened.
Can I say that before you go to your second thing, the irony here is that I just had Carla Greenbaum on the show like 2 days ago. And Carla, she's the principal investigator at Benaroya. So she's involved. Yeah, she's involved with the Protect study and Topple, and she's also is, I think, the lead chair. I think that's how she's described, for TrialNet.
Oh, well, fabulous. And your audience knows all about this, which is great. And I try to listen to all of your episodes, but I somehow haven't gotten to that one yet.
No. I think it genuinely went up like 2 days ago. So,
okay.
But that's just, as you're talking, you're like, you said the name of the trial, the study, Protect. And I was like, boy, I feel like someone just said that to me.
Yeah. No, it's an incredible drug that they found, and that it can prevent the onset of type 1 in people with antibodies, which is my other story. I took my 10-year-old daughter to get tested for autoantibodies, and she has none. So far, so good. But I knew that there was this teplizumab, and there's a few other drugs out there now that can really prevent the onset of type 1. And so I knew it was important to get her tested as well, so that we could do what we could to prevent the onset, if, or at least be aware of, her possibly getting type 1 as well. And when I took her to do the study, she was scared, of course. And, there'd been a lot of drama in our house around, needing shots and needles. And so she was just a little bit terrified of getting the blood draw. But when she got it done, she was really proud, and they gave her a shirt that said, I've contributed to science. And I think it gave her a sense of, hey, I'm doing something here, I'm involved. And so for me, I was like, wow, not only does this help, everybody with type 1 diabetes, but it actually is giving kids who are getting involved some sense of ownership and sense that they can do something about this.
Yeah. One thing that Carla talked about TrialNet that I feel like we just cruised right over and didn't dig deeply enough into was just the value that TrialNet provides. Like, if you are found to have antibodies when you're tested with them, then they support you then. It's not like they just go, hey, you have antibodies, you should go tell a doctor. It's not, it's you become part of this, this group, and you have actual people who understand what having the antibodies means there to talk to you and help you guide.
Yeah. And they're the ones also, they're involved with getting you into the trials that will help postpone the onset of diabetes, which is brilliant, as you and I both know. However many years you can have without it is good in the short run and the long run.
No kidding. This is directly from the I think it's benaroyaresearch.org. I think I'm saying Benaroya correctly is what I'm saying. Previous clinical studies have suggested a benefit of, how do you say the drug name? Teplizumab in prolonging insulin production in people who have recently been diagnosed with type 1. A recent landmark study showed that this drug can delay development in T1Ds in at-risk individuals. Development of T1D in at-risk individuals, meaning the project study is evaluating, and they're now evaluating how well the drug works in children and adolescents who have been recently diagnosed with type 1. In addition, the study will look into whether the medicine causes any unwanted side effects. So that's a really great study.
It's a really great study. And they've shown that on average, they can postpone the onset by 3 years. And it's been submitted to the FDA. So it should be, if all goes well, it should be on the market this year.
So the idea is you're screened, you show antibodies, don't have type 1 diabetes, go on this drug with a really hard to say name. And then, and then hopefully for up to 3 years, you don't get type 1.
You've nailed it. Yeah. And hopefully in those 3 years, they figure out something else that they can do with those beta cells that you're keeping, and keep that postponement going on.
Right. Yeah, you're buying time, right? So
and there's a lot, as you know, the advances and everything that's happening, and both treatments, drugs, cures for diabetes. It's moving rapid fire. So buying time is super important.
Yeah. Listen, even if it only got you 3 years and nothing else, that'd be amazing.
Yeah,
that would be amazing.
That would be worth it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I agree.
Oh, and I forgot to say the other thing that got me involved in this
Mm-hmm.
is I learned that 70% of clinical trials, and this isn't a diabetes number, this is just a general clinical trial number, but 70% of clinical trials don't complete due to lack of participation. And they find that the biggest reason there isn't enough participation is just that people don't know about the trials. So when people find out about them and they're, out there, and people tend to, they find the people to be part of them. But in general, 70% of trials don't fill. And so this is huge in terms of slowing down all the improvements in tech and drugs and cures. And so I thought that's a ridiculous number. I need to do what I can do to lower that number.
Yeah, well, that's really lovely. I know that to be 100% true because I work with T1D Exchange as well, and they collect the simplest data from people with type 1 diabetes. Like, it's not probing, or, do you know what I mean? Like, it's nothing you wouldn't just tell somebody in a casual conversation if you were, having a casual conversation. And their biggest concern too is just it's hard to get people to want to get involved. And the involvement is, I did it for my daughter. T1D Exchange specifically is for U.S. residents, and you have to be type 1 or the caregiver of somebody. And I might have taken 5, 6, 7 minutes to do what I needed to do. I did it on my phone, and I was like, well, this was all they needed, and it's hard to get that through to somebody. And then they get to the idea of study, we're collecting data, and then people get scared,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And some of these studies, like the one we talked about with the hard to say name, teplizumab, you need to get involved in that study. The new study, which is for recently diagnosed kids, you need to get in that study in 3 weeks of diagnosis. So that's really hard to get people. They're overwhelmed. They're not finding out about it until it's too late. And there's another one. Have you heard of there's a study called Clever?
I don't know that one.
So this one is sort of like the form you filled in online. This is a no-brainer for somebody to get involved in, and because it's really easy and it provides such a quick benefit. So it's a study that is looking at hybrid closed loop, which I know Arden is on, as is Nina, and verapamil, which is it's a blood pressure drug that's been on the market for, I think, over 20 years. And verapamil in a prior study in adults was shown to completely preserve beta cell function in newly diagnosed adult diabetics. So in this study, they're looking for 7 to 18-year-olds also within 3 weeks of diagnosis. They either put you on a hybrid closed loop or verapamil or both, or you could be in the fourth group where you don't get either. But regardless, they give you a Dexcom G6 for a year. You're possibly getting a closed loop system at diagnosis, and you're possibly getting a drug that might preserve your beta cells. So, it's just, I don't know. I think that's such an easy kind of study for people to get involved in. But again, they have to find out about it and call the right people within 3 weeks of diagnosis in order to become part of this.
Yeah. And how in the world are you going to find yourself on clinicaltrials.gov in the waning weeks after a diagnosis?
Yeah. So listen to Scott, get on clinicaltrials.gov if you've just been diagnosed. But and I don't know how you got Arden set up on the DIY loop, but for us, that was something we wanted to do right away. But, the Riley link was back ordered, and, we didn't do that within 3 weeks of diagnosis. So getting somebody to just give that to you right away, I think is, I don't know, makes my heart melt.
Yeah, it's lovely. How did we do it? So the way we did it was a listener of the podcast who I knew personally, through online. I don't think I know anybody personally anymore, but she was badgering me to do this. I don't know why. Like, she's going to come on one day and explain her whole thought process, but she was like, you should try this. So I looked really hard at it, and I thought, I feel comfortable with this for Arden, like safety wise. Yeah. And I really do believe that, different kinds of closed loop systems are going to be, our cutting edge and the way of the future. And I wanted Arden to be on it to begin with. And so I thought, well, while we're waiting for, more traditional offerings from companies, like, I'll give this a shot. And it ended up being terrific. It really is.
Yeah, no, it is. I agree. I don't know what we did without it for those 4 or 5 weeks that we couldn't get it going yet.
I was going to say, but it's funny though, but you only like you did it without an algorithm for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And during a newly diagnosed, so you're probably honeymooning then, I imagine too.
Yeah. And we were on a bicycle trip, so she was exercising. So that was, it was survivable.
I think that's really telling in that, for years, maybe upon decades, the message in diabetes has been, well, you should have diabetes for 6 months before we give you a pump, or a year before you get a glucose. There was always this idea of like you should struggle with it so you know what the
That's
struggle
insane.
is, right?
Yeah,
and it gets ingrained into people because it's told to them as a rule, and then it's told to more and more people, and those people create a community online, and then that's just when you hear something out loud, that's the reaction because people are like, well, my doctor told me I had to wait 6 months. And then someone else will come in and go, oh, my doctor said a year. And then there'll be the next person that's like, I got one in a month. Yeah. And it's just interesting how it creates I'm making air quotes, but it creates a rule like somehow that because a lot of people do something one way, this somehow is the rule.
Yeah. And we were not told that you should go on, the DIY loop a month after diagnosis.
No, you found the trial.
We asked around and figured out that's what we needed to do.
Yeah.
And and this study though, clever, it's spelled CLVER, just in case anyone who's listening wants to look it up. I mean, even if I've seen on some of these Facebook groups, like my doctor doesn't want me to get a CGM right away, or doesn't want me to get a pump right away. So I think that is changing and it's becoming more standard of care to get the devices more quickly, but this kind of study not only gets people potentially on a hybrid closed loop, definitely on the Dexcom right away, but it also gives them, I think this is a cool thing about the trials is that in addition to the endocrinologist who you generally see quarterly, it gets you an additional endocrinologist who's really by your side and who is constantly communicating with you, seeing how things are going, helping you get going. And so it's like people think that it's overwhelming in the first 3 weeks to get involved in a clinical study, but in a way, it would make it less overwhelming.
Feels like more support maybe for some people.
It would feel like more support. Yeah. So my Nina's friend who did the teplizumab trial, they have long conversations. I mean, teplizumab, you have to go in 12 days in a row to get the drug. You have to go into the study center. And so they sit there with the doctor who tells them all about how is your exercise affecting your diabetes and how is your menstrual cycle going to be affecting your diabetes. And so they learned so much just in having that one-on-one relationship that they got through doing that trial.
Yeah. So many conversations you get to have about like little micro topics you wouldn't get to have otherwise.
Yeah. You get these rock star endocrinologists just hanging out with you.
Yeah. I'm going to jump up on a soapbox for 1 second, say something, and then I want to ask you about your daughter's diagnosis. But just to go back for a second, and this has nothing to do with why you came on, but you've got me a little lit up inside about it. The idea that you should struggle for 6 months or a year so that you really understand diabetes, and then we'll give you the gear that makes it much easier and healthier way of living. And the idea is, well, we don't want to start you with that stuff because what if you lose it one day? You won't know what to do. And I'm like, well, what about all the people who won't lose it one day and will never have to struggle? Like, what's it hurt to move the struggle to the end from the beginning? Maybe it hurts. I can make the argument it hurts less. Like, why don't we take the struggle away from the beginning, show them what it looks like to have it this way? And then if something happens, if insurance falls through, or we're all running from zombies, so you can't get your Dexcom sent to you through FedEx. Like if that happens, then you'll learn you're telling me I should struggle for a whole year in case something bad happens?
Right.
Like, I don't understand. Like, that's just, that's one random way of thinking about it, which might not even be wrong, but it's odd to treat it like that's the only way to think about it.
Absolutely. I think it's a sin not to have people leave the hospital with a glucose monitor.
Yeah, I've said that a lot of times. So you should get one of those you should get a membership card. I don't know what you would do with a membership card. And then you should get a CGM. It just should be like here.
And honestly, Scott, I maybe gave 2 shots because we moved on to technology really, really quickly. Mm-hmm. And so, if you said, can you give my daughter a shot? probably like, oh no, I don't know how to do it, but I'd figure it out. If that's all we had left, if we lost all our devices,
Yeah.
I'd figure that out. I'd be okay.
Well, listen, here's a little anecdote that proves your point even more. I have given my daughter tens of thousands of injections, literally.
Yeah.
And now we haven't done it for a number of years, and I'm not very good at it anymore.
Right.
So turns out it's, I mean, I can do it and I get away with it. But if I do it for her, she looks at me like, I've had better experiences than the one you've just given. And I'll say, no, I know, I've forgotten. I don't do this much anymore. So
right. So why? I mean, obviously it was back in the day where that was the option, but why would you make someone do that just to forget how to do it and then have to relearn it in an emergency? Yeah.
I think if you dig deeper into this conversation, what you'll find is that a while back, and maybe even now still, you have doctors who are not comfortable with or understand the technology well. And I think they want you to get better at diabetes so that you won't come to them and ask them how to use the technology.
Yeah, could be. And I think, the good news is, and this does loop it back to the clinical trials, no pun intended with the looping. But I think that's going to change. Even from when my daughter was diagnosed, which was 2019, right? Mm-hmm. Like I've heard more and more people leaving the hospital with CGM. And now that there are on the market closed loop systems, and, Tide Pools is coming really soon. And as is, the Omnipod Horizon system, I mean, I think that's going to change.
Yeah. Well, listen, I hope so. But
yes, I hope so too.
But don't bet on it in every doctor's office is what I'm saying. So, and for every person who gets a great doctor and gets great direction, there are far more people who don't. And, it's just not, it needs to be said here, because if you show up here as a person who didn't get great direction, you need to know there's a difference between what was said to you and what other people do.
Right. And I think what people need to know is that they can decide, right? Like they can't necessarily decide you need a prescription in order to get insurance coverage, and in some cases to get the devices at all. But it was not standard of care in the hospital where my daughter was diagnosed to leave with devices. And we just said that this is, very strongly, this is what we want. There was a diabetes educator who agreed with us and, helped make it happen.
You just said something that took me back to like maybe my happiest moment when George W. Bush was president, and he was talking about like some Donald Rumsfeld like problem as Secretary of Defense. I don't remember what he was talking about, but he said, I am the decider and I decide what's best. And it just made me laugh forever, because I don't know, I am the decider is not English, but the point is you are the decider. You get to go into a doctor's office and listen to what someone says and think, that doesn't seem right for me.
Yeah.
And say that out loud. I always boil it down to very simply, if your doctor says no to you, you should ask why. Because very often you might find that there's no reason on the other side of that no, other than, that's not what we do around here.
And with diabetes, they're sending you home to be in charge. So, it's not the same as something where you're going back to the doctor for every shot or every, care decision. Yeah. You're going home and have to be in charge of making micro decisions every day. Mm-hmm. So you should be in charge of what technology you use.
There's a very real place you can get with type 1 diabetes. And if you have good tools and good, direction, it won't take you very long to get to them. And that place is where your endocrinologist becomes, for the most part, the nice person with the prescription pad and the ability to get your blood draws done for you. And then don't get me wrong, something comes up, you go right back to them. But your point is my point, saying it two different ways, is your doctor's not the one managing your blood sugars moment to moment.
Right.
And they're never going to be.
Yeah. And we've been lucky. We now have a doctor who not only respects what we know now, because obviously you learn so much when you go home and you make those day-to-day decisions, but she's actually even pretty good at looking at our data. And that's what, so much of that job now is looking at data and deciding what to change. And that's to their, that's not what they were trained in, right? So, but we have an endocrinologist who's really learned to make decisions based on all of that data, but that data is so much more than what they were trained to look at, right? So it's a tough job.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you 100%, I agree with you. It is a difficult thing for them. I don't want to seem like I'm coming down on doctors. I'm certainly not. I'm saying that there are different levels of direction that people get, and what you don't realize until you've spoken to thousands of people with diabetes is that everyone believes that the level they're getting is the right thing. And that becomes problematic if you never get outside of your bubble and don't hear something
which is
else.
why your podcast is great, because that gets people outside of their bubble. So thank you.
No, you're very welcome. I appreciate it. Why don't we do this? Tell me a little bit about your daughter's diagnosis. Gvoke HypoPen has no visible needle and is the first pre-mixed auto-injector of glucagon for very low blood sugar in adults and kids with diabetes, ages 2 and above. Not only is Gvoke HypoPen simple to administer, but it's simple to learn more about. All you have to do is go to gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with insulinoma or pheochromocytoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. Everyone deserves an accurate blood glucose meter, but not everybody has one. You can, though. You can have the Contour Next 1 meter. It is very affordable, and you can learn more about it easily right there from where you're sitting, on your phone, on your computer, by going to contournext.com/juicebox. Get to that link. Find out about the meter that Arden has been using for a couple of years now with a lot of success. A meter that very closely matches with her Dexcom G6, a meter that has second chance test strips, and a super bright light for nighttime viewing. On top of that, the Contour Next 1 is easy to hold, easy to carry, and easy to hide away in your purse or your pocket. It's not bulky. Sometimes size matters, but in this situation, a lot comes in this little package. But yet, it's not so small that you can't hold on to it. It's sort of perfectly sized, I guess is what I'm saying. I love the second chance test strips, being able to touch the blood, not get enough, and go back for more without wasting a strip. It's huge. And some of you might actually be eligible for a free meter, and they have a test strip program. There's a lot going on at contournext.com/juicebox that I think you should find out about. Head over now. If you're not able to remember the links to Contour and Gvoke, don't worry, they're right there in the show notes of your podcast player or at juiceboxpodcast.com. It's time now to get back to Kim, hear about her daughter's diagnosis, and then jump back into those clinical trial conversations. We're not nearly done yet.
Typical story. She, had the standard symptoms of being thirsty and took her. Actually, I called the pediatrician and she said, "It sounds like your daughter has diabetes." And I said, "No, that's ridiculous." And she said, "No, I think you should bring her in today." And I said, "Well, she's only free between 2 and 3. If you have an appointment, then I'll bring her in. If not, we'll bring her in next week." And luckily they had an appointment between 2 and 3. So that's when she was, taken directly from the pediatrician to the ER by my husband, who called me a bit in shock, because we have no family history. We have no medical background. This was just a completely new story for us. And, and she was 13, and 2 weeks from her diagnosis, we were supposed to go on a 3-week bicycle tour. And luckily, everyone in the hospital is very encouraging about continuing with that plan. So, so after I guess it was about 2 days of maybe 1 or 2 days being in the hospital with sharing a room with a screaming kid, a rude screaming kid who was like screaming to the doctors, "Get me some water." I wasn't there, but this is what I hear from my husband and my daughter. I was home with my younger daughter. We escaped from the hospital. We said, "Can you just give us a crash course, because we can't stay here another night?" And we went home. I spent the next week, on the phone trying to get coverage for a Dexcom and an Omnipod, and trying to get the Riley link before we left for France. Yeah, that was the beginning of now.
You weren't able to get that Riley link that quickly though, right?
I was not able to get the Riley link that quickly, but we did get the Dexcom and the Omnipod. And when we got back from our trip, 3 weeks later, the Riley link was waiting for us.
Nice. That's lovely. I just got the orange one. Do you know about the orange one?
I've seen about the orange one. Yeah. How is it?
It's got much better connectivity than the Riley link did for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. I should probably order one. Although I'm anticipating a switch to Tidepool, and as much as we love our Riley link, it has, we've been through 3 or 4. My daughter's, she's gotten some cracks in them, and
you say
she lives an active life.
Arden's is wrapped in hot glue. So she'll come over to me. She's like, this piece fell off. And then we try to surgically put it back on. And then eventually it comes off again. Then we end up just wrapping hot glue around it. And I want to be clear, the connectivity distance was problematic for us with or without the hot glue. But I listen, one of my most treasured ideas about the upcoming year is Omnipod 5 for that exact reason, because for people who don't understand, there's what Kim's daughter, I'm sorry, your daughter's name is? Nina. What Nina is using, what Arden's using, is a do-it-yourself link. We have a ton of episodes about it in the podcast, but the connectivity between the pump and the CGM and the app that resides on your phone, none of those things were built to do this. So you have to carry this separate device that helps these things all talk to each other. And some, brilliant guy came up with it, I think named it after his daughter. It's why it's called Riley Link. And it's just, it's amazing technology. Don't get me wrong. But what we're excited about here is that when Omnipod 5 comes out, which used to be called Omnipod Horizon, but it's going to be called Omnipod 5 when it arrives, is that this circuitry, this connectivity that the Riley link is doing, creating a bridge between the phone, the CGM, all this data together, will live, it'll live inside of the Omnipod when the Omnipod comes out. So the actual algorithm will be printed on every circuit board in every Omnipod. So you won't need to even have connectivity back to your phone, where right now is where Arden's algorithm lives. So Arden's and Nina's algorithm lives in an app on their phone, and the phone needs to be connected to the pump for it to do the things it's going to do: temp basal increases, decreases, all the stuff it does. But once Omnipod 5 comes, the algorithm will be right on the pod, which means you'll be able to walk away from your phone, and you'll only need your phone when you're saying, I'm taking in carbs now, or something like that, giving it actual direction. It's very cool. And that'll work just as well with Tidepool's version of the Omnipod, of the algorithm as well. Am I right about that?
Yeah. So with Tidepool, the algorithm will be on your device. So like your iPhone or your iPod, and with the Horizon 5, I guess that's both names. With the Omnipod 5, the algorithm will be in the device, but they're both great solutions, because you no longer have this extra device that needs to stay really close to you. So
Tidepool's going to still need a bridge?
They need a bridge, but you no longer need a RF to Bluetooth converter, which is what the Riley link is. So, okay. But yes, you'll need an iPhone.
So it'll just be from the phone to the pod.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So no Riley link, but still the algorithms on the phone. I got it.
On the phone. Exactly. Yeah.
I can't wait to learn about all this as it's coming out this year. So
yeah, it's very cool. And these are things that are no longer in clinical trials. So they're coming real soon, because they've been through all the trials and they've been proven to work and submit to the FDA. So pretty soon we'll all get to try them.
Yeah, waiting for the FDA to say yes, right?
Yes, exactly.
That's exciting. Okay, so your daughter's diagnosed pretty commonly. Is there any type 1 or other endocrine issues in your family? Does somebody have a hypothyroid situation, celiac disease, anything like that?
I have Hashimoto's, so yes.
There we go.
I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's, and then learned that my mom and my grandmother have Hashimoto's. So yeah, we have some autoimmune stuff in the family, that's it. Yeah.
Your mom and your grandmom just call it like being tired, or what was the?
I think they took like low dose levothyroxine and just never really talked about it.
Gotcha. Yeah. Gotcha. And so you have it. When were you diagnosed?
About 5 years ago, after 2 years of hardly being able to work and my husband telling me I was a zombie. And then I was like, okay, there's a way to fix this.
Gotcha.
So, yes.
So in the correspondence that we've done back and forth, you said that you enjoyed the thyroid episode that I did with Dr. Benito.
Did. What is the name of that woman again? She was brilliant.
Addie Benito. She is
Addie
really.
Benito.
Yeah.
I loved her. So I was diagnosed maybe 5 years ago, but what she shared on that episode is sort of what I've learned over 5 years, and she shared it in an hour. So, take Cytomel, change your diet, do this, do that. Like she had all of the non-standard protocols like completely covered. And those are the things that really bring you from like 50% functioning with the standard drugs to, I'd say, 90% functioning with all the other stuff she threw in there. So I wish I had heard her episode 5 years ago. And I think, Scott, it took diabetes for me to understand that there's so much more we can do for any medical issue on our own,
So you felt like I take this pill and whatever boost I get out of it is what I get. And that's that.
Yeah.
I find her voice to be most comforting when she says things that are difficult to separate from like something I heard on the internet versus something that's really valuable. And that's why I enjoy her a lot. And I'll tell you, she is, I was clear about this in the episode, but she is my wife and daughter's endocrinologist for their thyroid.
Yes. She's brilliant. I'm thinking of giving her a call. I think I'm doing a lot of what she said already now, but, I loved her. She was very clear and, just very, really combining great sort of standard medical expertise with, what more can we do through diet and other,
I'm a big fan of somebody who A, understands what they're talking about, B, can talk about it, and C, leaves you with something that's actionable that shows value.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and speaking of celiacs, I don't know if Nina has celiac or not. She's only been tested once and she hasn't really been eating gluten. But there's actually, back to my passion, my clinical trials, there is a study out right now that just launched that is a 6-month study with an oral pill and it's for patients who have type 1 diabetes and celiac. And the pill is supposed to like protect the T1D from like intestinal and symptomatic distress that they might have if they accidentally digest minute amounts of the gluten protein. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of interesting. And that's like for kids and adults. And it's a T1D and celiac trial. Is
that drug something that you take like, oopsie, I just ate bread and I didn't mean to, or is it something you take every day in case it happens?
I think it's something that I'm not sure if it's daily or what the protocol is, but I think it's something that you take for 6 months. And then, so I don't think it's an oops thing.
Gotcha. What's that trial called?
It is, that's a good question. If you talk about hard to say words, it's lataglutenase treatment, LATI, then gluten, ASE, lataglutenase treatment.
They should let me name these things because I would call it oopsie, I had bread. And then everybody would remember and that would be that.
Yeah. Well, they did a good job with Protect. Clever is pretty good, although you have to know that it's CLVER.
Because if you don't, it happened to me while you were talking. If you Google clever type 1 diabetes, you just get a bunch of cartoons that are like lighthearted things about that.
If you Google Protect type 1 diabetes, you might also not get the study, right?
Yeah.
So you have to know how to spell teplizumab.
Yeah.
Maybe you can put that in your show notes.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody. It's an interesting word. It's much easier to say when you're not looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that's true.
The spelling makes my brain go, I can't be saying this right.
Yeah, I keep saying it because now that I've got it, I have to use it. Teplizumab. But I should let your audience know too, though. I mean, clinicaltrials.gov is awesome. I don't have a medical background, so there's certainly ways that things are written in there that are not super audience friendly for non-medical professionals, but it's a pretty good resource. And you can just go in and you can type in celiac or type 1 diabetes and put in your location and your age or your child's age, and it'll spit out for you all of the trials that are available in your area.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that I wanted to really let people know is that when you go to clinicaltrials.gov, if you scroll down to the bottom and see the locations, there's a name and phone number there. And those are the people, I can tell people about what trials are going on, but I don't necessarily know every detail about them. But if you call that number and get in touch with the person who is either the investigator or somebody who works with the investigator in your region, they'll tell you everything that you need to know about a trial that you might be interested in. And you should absolutely call them. That's what they're there for. They want to hear from you. So I find clinicaltrials.gov pretty easy to navigate. There's another tool, though, that JDRF launched. It's called I think there's two things. One, there's something called the JDRF Clinical Trial Connection Tool. So if you Google JDRF Clinical Trial Connections Tool, it takes you to a search engine where you can put in your age, your location, when you were diagnosed, or actually that's coming soon, just a whole bunch of other information about yourself, and it will spit out clinical trials that are a fit for you.
Okay.
And then it will let you know down the road if there's anything new that matches for you. So those are great, like, databases that you can use. But honestly, I find out because I call the trial centers and learn what's happening. But before I was doing this job, the way I found out about most clinical trials was really just signing up for all the newsletters. Like JDRF is always sending out newsletters with information about what's new and what new trials are happening. And, all the other diabetes organizations like Diatribe and Brave Buddies. And like, there's just a ton of newsletters you can get. And then there's one other resource I want to give. There's a guy named Josh Levy who lives in Northern California, but he reports worldwide on type 1 diabetes. And like us, he's a parent who decided to do what he can to help. And he has a blog called Cure Research for Type 1 Diabetes. And if you like Google Josh Levy, Levy diabetes, you can find his blog. And he actually gets pretty technical, although, like me, he's not a medical professional. I think he's a software developer, but he writes about everything new, like what the findings are on all the latest studies, what studies are being offered. And so I've learned from him that, in Europe, they're studying how, vitamin D and probiotics are helping people manage their blood sugar. And so, these are interesting studies just to know about, because heck, I can give my daughter some vitamin D,
Mm-hmm.
even if I can't get into the study in the Netherlands.
Yeah, Arden takes vitamin D, a significant amount, and we all do here, actually.
Yeah, it's a good thing, especially with COVID, evidently.
Yeah, who knows? I can't say I can't say one way or the other. I just know that it's inexpensive and not hard for me to take. So
yes, and evidently a lot of diabetics, a lot of people with type 1 diabetes have low vitamin D.
Yeah.
And so there's something going on with the beta cell receptors and vitamin D that it's important to learn to supplement if they need it. And my daughter's level was super low when we got it tested.
Yeah, low vitamin D. I think you might find with Hashimoto's too. A low ferritin level, like your iron level's off a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And B12 is another thing to look at when you're getting your blood test, to have those checked. There's also, and Addie talked about it in her episode, you really do have to be cognizant of levels that your doctor will tell you are in range, because in range has a pretty broad meaning, and levels where they see things happening. Like I want to use one of the numbers. Like Addie said, if you're a female of, God, you have to go back to listen to the episode. I think she was talking about, if you're menstruating and you're female, that your iron, like your ferritin level needs to be at like 70 or something like that. Like it can be lower and be considered in range, but there's a level that she sees it at that is just more optimal. And so anyway, you can't always just take like, I'm in the range.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think for vitamin D, they got Nina from 17 to 25 by giving her a mega dose of vitamin D for a week. But they say optimal is more like 30 or even 50. Mm-hmm. So even though she's now considered, quote, in range, I don't think it's good enough.
Yeah. So when we the same thing, you get this prescription for this 10,000 IUs. You take it once weekly. Sometimes they give you 4 or 8 pills, depending on how low you are, to kind of boost your vitamin D. But I would say that in this house, everyone here is taking like 5,000 IUs of vitamin D a day. It's not too much. In our opinion, we also take I agree, small amount of zinc, B12. I have to take iron, and I take it with an ascorbic acid because my body won't pick it up if the two aren't taken together. Yeah. So there's little tricks there for that. And you can't take iron every day. Like I had to figure that on my own. Like I had to figure out how much do I have to take to impact it. And that is you can't just start taking stuff and never think about it again. You have to book follow-up blood draws and things like that. So I took it every day. It made my iron too high. I felt fine, but the doctor's like, try taking it like 3 times a week and see what happens. So we kind of took some back a little bit. It's a bit of a process. Yeah. But it's very valuable when it's over.
Yes, absolutely. Having energy is a key.
Yeah. You don't realize, I've tried to make this point a bunch of times, but as your energy diminishes, you don't have a perspective of where it was on day one versus where it is now. You just, it's a struggle. It just feels like the struggle to stay alive gets harder, but you don't feel like today is any different than last month for some reason.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, which is why you need your husband to tell you seem like a zombie.
Yeah. How'd that go when he told you that, by the way?
I said, you're right.
Really? I would have got yelled at for that. See?
Yeah. Yeah. He was right. And it's just sort of, I'd faded over time, but luckily Yeah,
I wonder why that is. It's really fascinating stuff. And
so I wanted to ask you about one other super important development in the type 1 world. Have you heard about ViaCyte?
Oh, ViaCyte. I remember talking to somebody about that years ago.
Okay. So this is super exciting news. They have just launched a clinical trial of basically taking stem cells that they get from IVF, and they make them into precursor beta cells in the lab. So basically when these cells are put in a human, they become beta cells and produce insulin and all the other hormones that our type 1 diabetics are missing. They put the way they're able to put these cells into patients. So they've been putting these cells in patients before, but they needed to give those patients immunosuppressive drugs. So it was really only something that they were testing in people who had, really poorly controlled diabetes, hypoglycemia, unawareness. But now they've figured out a way. They've partnered with the company that makes like Gore-Tex jackets. They also are a big medical materials company called Gore. So Gore made these packets, and they put these precursor beta cells in the packets. They make a small incision along the sides of the patient. They stick the packets in. So it's like a minor surgical procedure. And voila, they produce insulin. So this is a functional cure for diabetes. They call it a functional cure because, you need the packets, right? It's not
you still have type
producing
1. Right.
The insulin, but effectively, once this is working and functioning inside of a type 1 diabetic, they no longer need to, take insulin, exogenous insulin. It's being produced within their body when they need it. So this is a trial that started last month. So it's brand new, but they did it in various animal studies, and it was shown to work. They've already put the precursor beta cells into, humans who have without the packets, and that's been proven to work. So they know that this works, and they're testing it in humans now. Mostly to make sure that the packets work. They've put different materials in before. The first one they tried didn't work because, it didn't cause any bad problems, but basically people built up a little bit of fibrosis around the packet, and then it wouldn't, the insulin and the other hormones couldn't get out as well. So they have redesigned this material, and now they've tested this material in animals that the other one didn't work in. And so they know that it works in animals that are very similar to humans. And they just started this trial. It's launched now in Texas and Georgia, and both in Southern and Northern California. for, obviously they're not testing it yet in kids, but for people ages 18 to 65, they're looking for patients to try this out. And this is really, really exciting because this is literally the first functional cure that doesn't require immunosuppression that's happening in humans. And this one brings tears to my eyes.
It's really interesting that you bring this up because as soon as you said VitaSite, I was like, I know that company name. And so I went to my own website and searched it. And I did an interview about this in 2014. Yes. In 2014, I interviewed a JDRF scientist who was talking about this.
Yeah. So JDRF funded a lot of the early research for VitaSite and got them off and running on their own. And I think JDRF funded the early animal and early preclinical research on this technology.
Yeah. And back then, I remember him saying 10 years, it might take 10 years to figure it out.
And so what year was that? What year
2014. He told me 10 years.
Okay. And they're ahead of schedule.
And he also said that the biggest issue ends up being is scaling. Like you can. I remember talking to him about the technology is amazing, right? Like the idea that one day there might be a packet of something that you have inserted under your skin that might last for, and I forget back then what they were hoping it would last, a year. I think they were hoping for something like that. You'd have it switched out when it stopped being effective. Right. And I think they were hoping to make that longer, and but that was still a lot of hoping. But what he said is that even if because I asked him this question, I said, if you got it perfect, right? Like you just got it perfect and it was ready to go, how long until we see it then? He goes, well, that's when the real problems come up with manufacturing, getting the cells, scaling. It's not like with COVID, right? Where you're like, okay, well, first we'll come up with a vaccine. And then when we have a vaccine, we'll produce it all. And maybe it'll take us a year to get it all produced for everybody, which sounds long to people because we've been trapped in our houses for, coming up on 11 months here. But, but the truth is that to make enough of anything to give to everybody in a year is amazing. But he said this would take much longer than that. It would take
I'm going to give you
what
three
are they
updates.
Saying now? Yeah.
I'm going to give you 3 updates from that. So one is they have solved the supply and scale problem because this is newer research. Back when they started doing this, they were using cells that they got from cadavers, and that was hard to find and it was hard to get enough. And so, you've got patients still like they do, they know that this technology works partly because they do islet transplants, but they've been using cadavers. They've been doing that for a while. It was called the Edmonton Protocol. So now what's new is that they've figured out how to make these precursor beta cells from stem cells. And they say they have basically an unlimited supply. Like you don't even need one, sort of IVF result to get I guess, I don't know what the numbers are, but enough stem cells for most of the patients. Like it's evidently an unlimited supply of stem cells now that they know how to do this in the lab. The other thing is this GOR material. This is one of the things they're testing. They don't know how long it will last, but that 1 year, I think they're hoping that can be a lot longer in terms of, how often you need to get the packets changed out. But that's one of the things that they'll be testing. So they've kind of solved the supply and scale thing, and they're testing out that, how long can it last?
I'm going to ask you to test my recollection. So the idea is that these cells that are going to make insulin, right? They're going to notice your body's need for insulin and make just enough the way your pancreas would. Get put inside of this packet. And the problem ends up being that if your body can get to it because you have type 1 diabetes, your body's going to kill those cells too, the way it went after your pancreas.
Exactly.
So you have to be able to keep them alive and functioning and keep your immune system from being able to get to them. And that's what this Gore-Tex thing.
So blood flow has to get through, but you have to protect the cells from the immune system attack, right? So that's why it's such a specialized material. They have, if you go to the ViaSite, VIA site, CYTE. If you go to the ViaSite website, they have a 4-minute video that describes how these packets work. And so they have I think they have micro holes in them that enable the blood flow, but somehow also protect at the same time from the immune system attack.
Do you think one day, Kim, you'll just go to TrialNet, they'll tell you have antibodies, and then a surgeon will put a Gore-Tex blanket over your pancreas, and that'll be the end?
I'll just put my jacket on. I'll be good to go.
I'm just now picturing a pancreas like, oh, I got to wear this Snuggie now. And
that's right.
Yeah.
I'm protected from the rain, and I'm not going to get diabetes. That's right.
Well, I have to be honest. In 2014, the reason they were on, I had a really popular blog back then. So there was a gateway to getting your information onto it. I just didn't let anybody who wanted to say something, be involved, put something on the site. I was super excited about it back then because it seemed to me, and I remember saying this back then, that this is all wrapped around science that we currently understand how to use. And that's why it was exciting to me, because it wasn't theoretical in anybody's mind anymore. It was like, if we take this and protect it like this, then this happens.
Yeah. And they've been doing every piece of this. So they know it works. It just, and so I think they're interviewing the initial patients now to get going. And this is going to be really, really exciting to follow. And if anyone out there 18 to 65, they're going to expand the sites. I think they're going to have 10 sites throughout the United States, but right now it's Texas, Georgia, and California. Our kids, kids are too young, but wow. I think it's really exciting.
Maybe someone else should be coming up with a zipper so that we can have installed on our bodies so that we can just unzip it and stick the pack in. I'd like to see someone get involved in that pretty quickly.
That's right. Yeah. That would be, we'll work on that on the side.
Any doctor out there listening who wants to develop a zipper, I think is a great idea. I don't obviously understand how the human body works.
Well, hopefully they won't have to take them in and out that often, and they won't need the zipper.
Well,
I think that one's behind. They haven't even started that one in animal studies.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be something? Not the zipper thing, Kim, but wouldn't it be something? I got you laughing in the wrong direction. Wouldn't it be something if they could make something like this work and it wasn't a yearly thing? Even it was, God, if you could get 3 years out of it, just to show back up in a doctor's office, on some sort of incremental, schedule, and they, open it back up, take out the packet, put in a new packet. That's fairly
what
exciting.
It is. Yeah. So I know you don't have as much time, but my daughter has 4 more years till college, so I'm hoping this stuff keeps coming.
Oh, I hope so too. It can't come fast enough. I'm up for all of it. I really am. I'm a big fan. In general, I'm a fan of taking as good of care of yourself as the current technology allows.
Yeah.
So if a CGM exists, I would like it. If, and I felt that way so many years ago when we had the first Dexcom that we ever had, which people would tell you like, oh, it didn't work that great. You know what it worked better than? Everything else that existed before it. And then the next Dexcom comes out and they go, oh, it's a little better, but it's not a big leap, isn't it? Because it's better than everything else that ever existed before.
Exactly. Yeah. And, I've talked about some pretty groundbreaking stuff. I mean, these are really exciting things like teplizumab and ViaCyte, but all of those incremental getting better things, right? Like the G7, I know you've had, Dexcom on to talk about that, and faster insulins, which I know you've tried, and they're coming up now with glucose responsive insulins and all the closed loops. Like it gets better and better. And why not use the best?
I've said this a million times and I'll keep saying it. You do not want to wake up one day and realize that you're managing your type 1 diabetes the way they did it a decade ago. You need to kind of stay. You don't have to be on the absolute tip of the sword as far as things go, but you need to be on the crest of the wave that's moving forward.
And I think that's hard, Scott. I mean, I think my daughter was diagnosed 1.5 years ago, and then I took this role helping educate people about clinical trials. So it's I mean, partly selfishly, this job is keeping me abreast of everything that's new. But I've met a lot of people, lovely dads in our community who have, given Nina some advice when she first got diagnosed, and they're not staying on top of it because they've figured out how to manage what they've been doing for the last 30 years. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's, I think, the hardest part is how do either of us really get the word out to these people who have just sort of settled into what they've been doing for so long, but it could be so much better. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how to reach everybody. I talk about it every once in a while when I talk more about like the idea of a podcast over the diabetes aspect of it. There's 1 point, I don't know, do you know what the number is now? 1.8 million Americans have type 1 diabetes. Is that right? Am I
Yeah, I
close
think
to that
that's
number?
about right.
And, you know, I probably have an audience that is as big as an audience of people who are interested in type 1 diabetes as exists. And I don't touch a small percentage of those people. So,
well, I think, you know, part of the problem is both of us get access. I mean, maybe you more than me, you get access to the people who already care a little bit and are looking for more information, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, that really is it, is that there's only even a small percentage of people who have it even think to look for more information.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that we do get, because JDRF does, because JDRF gives out this bag of hope, which is, you know, all this information about diabetes and stuffy. And, you know, they give these bags to people when they get diagnosed. And so they find out about new diagnoses and can get in touch and see how they can help these patients. And so we do find out about people who have new diagnoses to get information to them. But these people who've had it for so many years, it's a little harder to find them. And, you know, a lot of these studies I talked about are for kids, but something like ViaCyte, I mean, I should probably email all these dads and let them know about it. Right.
Yeah, it really is the biggest, one of the biggest issues is just finding people and connecting with them. It is not easy. And like you said, people get into a settled situation where they're managing well now and they don't think about it much anymore. And that becomes, you know, they become more disconnected from a space that might have great information for them. And you know what? And some people might just not care, which is fine too, you know?
Yeah, but they won't, I know, but that's hard because I feel like they won't care. But if they just would make get the latest and greatest, they'd be like, oh, wow. But you're right. You can't do anything for somebody who really just doesn't want to change.
Yeah, they're not interested. I'm not about pushing things on people, but I do love the idea of letting them know about it. You know?
Well, that's the thing. That's when I found out that 70% of trials don't fail because people don't know about them.
Mm-hmm. Like,
I mean, I just feel like the benefits personally to getting involved in these trials, not just sort of medically and societally, this is, people can, they get their free Dexcom, their personal endocrinologist, a sense of control, and really the latest and greatest drugs and technology and now cures. So, and
you help move the whole thing forward too, which is really about it. Is taking, we were just talking about on something recently. I think I said it with Carla, like, this idea of like, you're just pushing things forward. And you have to be excited to know that you might be part of something that happens so many years from now that you don't get to see the end result of it. But I'll tell you why that should mean more to people who have type 1 is because, it's very likely that if it's, if your kid has type 1 diabetes, it might not be their kid, but it might be their kid's kid, but it's very likely going to stay in your family. I mean, look at you. You've got 3 women with Hashimoto's. If your daughter ends up with Hashimoto's, that ain't going to be any great surprise. And
no, not at all. The levels are trending there. Yeah.
Right. And so why not, if you can, why not take what's happening to you and help make it so that people in the future maybe don't have to live the same way? That's how all this happens, Yeah. So get involved.
Absolutely. And I really feel like they won't. And and if I can, do whatever I can I know you're interviewing a ton of people, like you said 2 days ago, somebody who's involved as an investigator with the teplizumab trial. But if I can do anything to keep you informed of everything that's going on with the trials so that you can inform your audience, I'd love to.
Kim, you're well-versed and your microphone sounds good. You've got the job.
Okay.
You let me know. Let me know as you know about things. I appreciate it. Let me say goodbye to you here because Arden's bugging me to make her lunch. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. After that, check out the Contour Next One blood glucose meter. You need an accurate meter that you can count on. And you can have it at contournext.com/juicebox. Last, I want to thank Kim for doing this and let you know I think she's going to be back again. Kim knows a lot about this clinical trial stuff, and I found it very interesting. I hope you did too. We'll see you soon.